He was the kind of officer who believed rank gave him power over silence, the kind who mistook fear for respect and obedience for weakness. Captain Raymond Hasker had served 20 years in the state training corps, known across the military academies for his harsh discipline and unyielding authority. When he walked into a room, conversations ended. His voice carried the kind of tone that reminded cadets they were property of the state. Their sweat, their pain, their loyalty belonged to the flag, not themselves. But in 1978, during a public training exhibition at Fort Cresson before 284 officers and state representatives, a quiet cadet named Helena Ward would rewrite that belief forever. She had joined the corps with the reputation of a thinker rather than a fighter. She had a background in mechanical engineering from the University of Delaware. She was analytical, reserved, the kind who watched before she acted. Hasker hated that kind of student. To him, thoughtfulness was defiance and silence was an insult. He believed a soldier should respond, not reflect. Helena endured months of his mockery and verbal punishment. He made her run extra miles for not answering fast enough. He humiliated her during drills, calling her the quiet statue in uniform. He called her that so often that some cadets began whispering the nickname around the base. Helena never reacted. She followed every order precisely, never argued, never broke her discipline. She understood something Hasker never did. Silence was not weakness, it was control. The day everything changed began like any other humid morning in the Fort Cresson parade ground. The sun was high, brass-polished boots aligned in perfect rows, and the state officials sat in the shaded viewing platform. The annual exhibition was the pride of the corps, the day when cadets demonstrated hand-to-hand combat before their commanding officers and political overseers. Hasker had been selected to oversee the demonstration of close-quarter drills, his favorite part of the exhibition because it gave him a stage to show dominance, and he picked Helena Ward to be his demonstration partner. As soon as he called her name, the rows of cadets stiffened. Everyone knew he did not choose lightly. He enjoyed breaking people publicly. Helena stepped forward, helmet under her arm, calm expression, face unreadable. Hasker grinned and told the crowd, "This cadet is an example of obedience through silence, a soldier who speaks only when told, but today she will learn that silence is not always golden." He ordered her to take position. Helena obeyed, her boots steady, eyes fixed on him as he circled her, describing to the audience how a commander must maintain control, how defiance must be crushed, and how a soldier's hesitation can mean death. Then he moved fast, faster than anyone expected. He struck at her shoulder, not as part of the demonstration but to test her reaction. She blocked instinctively, but he twisted her arm and barked, "See hesitation, she flinches and loses control." Laughter echoed lightly among some officers. Helena remained composed, eyes calm, breathing steady. He taunted again, "Strike back," he said, "prove you can act." She hesitated, not from fear but restraint. The crowd watched, expecting submission. He shoved her again, harder. She stumbled, regained balance, but said nothing. He grabbed her wrist again, tighter this time, twisting until her elbow joint strained, and that's when something in her face changed. The silence she held for months, the restraint, the endurance, all collapsed into a single motion. Witnesses later said it happened so fast that they barely understood it. First she pivoted, her stance dropped, her weight shifted, her wrist inside his grip and twisted outward with perfect mechanical precision. There was a sharp crack, the sound of bone giving way. The laughter stopped. The entire field froze. Hasker fell to one knee, clutching his forearm, his face twisted in shock. Helena stepped back, breathing evenly, eyes fixed on him, not in rage, not in fear, but in calm control. 284 people watched as the man who built his career on breaking others was now broken himself. One of the officers rushed forward, shouting, "Medic!" but Hasker waved him away, too proud to admit pain. He looked up at her and hissed, "You're finished, cadet." But in that moment he knew he wasn't talking to her, he was talking to the reflection of his own collapse. Helena didn't speak, she simply saluted, turned and walked off the demonstration field. The senior commander, Colonel Price, stepped forward, unsure whether to reprimand or applaud. Within hours the incident spread across the base like wildfire. By evening it was in every report. By morning it reached the governor's office. The official line said an accident occurred during a physical exhibition, but the people people who had seen it with their own eyes knew it wasn't an accident, it was judgment. The arm that once held authority now hung useless in a sling. Investigations followed. Of course, Hasker filed complaints claiming assault, claiming disrespect, claiming she had disobeyed, but every witness report confirmed he had provoked her physically beyond regulation boundaries. Quietly and without fanfare, the board dismissed the case, but not without a condition. Helena Ward was discharged honorably under the clause of irreconcilable command conflict. They gave her a certificate stamped with the state insignia and sent her home. But stories have their own way of traveling. A few months later, her name resurfaced in an article published by a retired colonel who had attended that same exhibition. He wrote about the new kind of soldier, the one who doesn't need to shout to command respect, the one whose silence is louder than authority. Within a year, the Fort Cresson Training Code was amended to include psychological and ethical conduct regulations banning physical humiliation in demonstrations. Captain Hasker retired shortly after, citing medical reasons, though insiders said the real injury wasn't his arm, it was his reputation, his control, his myth of power. The cadets never forgot that day. Some said that Helena became a symbol whispered about in other bases as the woman who taught the state the difference between obedience and dignity. She went on to work as an engineer in a civilian defense lab designing joint stabilizers, ironically for wounded soldiers. She never gave interviews, but one journalist who managed to reach her years later said when asked about the incident she only smiled and said silence isn't surrender, sometimes it's a countdown. The journalist described her workshop filled with mechanical arms and prosthetics, prototypes of machines designed to restore motion to broken limbs. Her life had moved past the incident, but history had not. For the people who witnessed it, that day remained etched in their memory, the sound of a bone snapping, not as an act of violence but of justice unspoken, precise, inevitable. Years later, in a military ethics lecture room, a young instructor showed archival footage of the 1978 exhibition, the camera shaky, the crowd visible, the moment blurred by distance but still visible enough to see her stance, her movement, her composure. The instructor paused the video and told the cadets, "You are looking at the moment when the culture of fear ended in this institution. You are looking at the end of silence." They called it the Ward turn, a defensive move now part of standard self-defense curriculum across multiple academies, taught not as a strike but as a symbol of restraint turned into action, one movement that changed the code of conduct. Helena herself never claimed credit, but her legacy spread across generations of officers. Even decades later, on the walls of Fort Cresson, a plaque was placed near the old parade ground engraved with words none of the officers could ever forget. She stayed silent until silence became power. The lesson lingered not only in the Corps but in the state itself. Policies shifted, leaders were trained not just in tactics but in empathy. Seminars on authority and ethics became mandatory across state institutions. The ripple of that single moment in 1978 transformed the invisible machinery of command. The footage became case study material in universities, military and civilian alike. Every year new cadets watched it without commentary, just the moment replayed slowly, reminding them that authority without respect is hollow. Over time, people began to interpret the event as metaphorical. Some called it a revolution of respect, others called it the silent rebellion. The historical archives labeled it disciplinary incident 42A, no emotion, just cold record keeping. But those who were there knew it was more than that. One of them, Lieutenant Marshall, who later became a general, wrote in his memoirs that Helena's silence had haunted him for decades. He wrote that when he first saw her walk away, he realized command is not about control, it's about balance between firmness and fairness. He admitted that before that day he had mocked the idea of restraint. Now he taught it. He said the sound of that broken arm was the sound of an old system cracking. Decades passed and Fort Cresson closed down, its grounds converted into a museum. Visitors still walk past the field where it happened. Some stop to read the plaque, some move on, but the story refuses to die. It keeps retelling itself in the quiet spaces where power meets conscience. Helena Ward never sought fame. She never returned to the base or appeared in ceremonies, but every once in a while someone would see her at military hospitals consulting on prosthetic design, her hair grayed, her posture still perfect, and when she walked past officers they saluted instinctively, not because of rank but respect. Those who looked closely said that her right wrist still bore a faint scar from the grip that had once tried to control her. It became a reminder that strength doesn't always roar, sometimes it waits, measures, and when the time comes it moves with precision across history books. The incident of Fort Cresson became a lesson in leadership, studied in courses about authority, ethics, and reform. Historians argued about motives, psychologists wrote essays about behavioral restraint, politicians referenced it in speeches about reform and justice, but the essence remained unchanged. One moment of quiet defiance became louder than decades of command. It showed the world that power built on fear is temporary, but dignity built on silence is eternal.